In thoroughbred racing, looks sell, especially in young, untested horses. And looks mean more than just a pretty face. When knowledgeable horse people assess a young horse's conformation, the way the horse is put together, they look at the entire package. They consider the relationship of form to function. Does the horse's build and body type make him suitable for the task ahead? Can this horse withstand the rigors of racing? They pay particular attention to the horse's legs. Well, they should. A thoroughbred racehorse is a marvelous feat of engineering, but nature did not design him to run at great speeds for long distances. All you have to do is look at the horse to see this. Look at the large body mass, then at the delicate legs that support 1,000 pounds or more. Look at the feet. They're about as big as a tea saucer. Therefore, a good set of legs and good feet can improve the odds that a horse will stay sound. And it's not just how the legs look, it's how the horse uses them. Experienced horse people will always watch a young horse walk. Do his legs travel in a straight path, or do his feet point in or out? Does he cover the ground when he walks? Is he free and easy in his back? Everyone wants a horse with good legs, but legs are just part of the package. A strong back, a good shoulder, solid hindquarters, all should be considered when you try to assess a horse's potential as a runner. No horse is perfect. All come with flaws of some kind. It's a matter of trying to determine what flaws you can live with and which ones you can't. The Blood Horse has assembled a group of experts to offer insights into the art of conformation. Everyone has his or her own method, but there are common elements to judging conformation that you'll hear again and again. Kentucky Derby-winning trainer Bob Baffert takes us through his barn at Churchill Downs and shows us some of his racehorses. Becky Thomas, a big name at the 2-year-old sales, shows us some of her auction prospects and tells us what catches her eye in a young horse. Reiley McDonald and Tom VanMeter, whose Eaton Sales is a highly successful consignor to the major auctions, share their expertise in the area of yearling conformation. And Hall of Fame trainer Mack Miller talks about what he likes to see in a racing prospect. Bob Baffert got into the training game with quarter horses. The Arizona native started galloping horses for his father at age 12, then started training after graduating from the University of Arizona. He added thoroughbreds to his California-based stable in 1989, then switched full-time to that breed in 1991. Baffert won the 1992 Breeders' Cup Sprint with 30 Slews, who cost $30,000. He's had a lot of success with other horses who were relatively inexpensive. One notable example is 1997 Kentucky Derby and Preakness Stakes winner Silver Charm, who cost $85,000 as a 2-year-old. Baffert admits that Silver Charm is not a perfect horse. He has a few little conformational problems just like many other horses. But Baffert's keen eye takes in the horse's potential as an athlete.
I find that one athlete that I think has enough pedigree, but yet the body, most of those horses, my better horse that I've bought are horses that they might have had a little physical problem, like maybe they were a little bit crooked, they turned out a little bit, because a lot of them as yearlings can change, and they can straighten out a lot, and so basically I find a horse that I think I know at least that can run, and just hopefully he can go to the next level.
Some problems don't bother Baffert. For instance, a horse whose right front foot might point out a little.
If the horse turns out a little bit, if he turns out in his right, I don't mind it too much, because if it turns out in the left, I really don't. I stay away from it, because it seems to me on the, and it's trial and error. I've bought horses that turned out crooked, offset knees. I've bought all kinds, back at the knees or whatever, but it just seems to me that horses that turn out on their right a little bit, the only problems I've had with them, they might get shin sore or whatever, but if they turn out in their left, I think going into the turn, I think it's harder on them, because they're putting a lot of pressure on their sesamoid. So I'll forgive a horse that turns out as long as their body's not too heavy. If they're light, proportioned, and everything, look like they're not going to get too heavy, then you can get away with some of that.
But there are some conformational problems that Baffert will avoid.
If they're real back in the knees, it makes it tough. I mean, sometimes I've had horses that they can have the most beautiful body, and they're back in those knees, but the thing is about it, it's just so hard on them, because once you, when you start really grinding on them, they start working them 5/8 of a mile, going 3/4, it can be really, really tough on them. It puts a lot of pressure on those knees, so I tend to stay away from those.
Baffert shows us a horse that required a little imagination when the trainer bought him for $19,000 as a yearling. This horse had a few strikes against him, but Baffert thought the colt's good points outweighed the bad.
When I go to the sales, I take a whim on some horses that are, they might be the the sleepers of the sale. So I found this horse. He's by Quiet American. And Quiet American, another thing too, when you go to these sales, you want to look, you want to know, I know what all these stallions look like. I watched them run. Quiet American was a tremendous racehorse, but he wasn't like a really beautiful, typey type of horse. He was he looked a lot like this horse here, but he could really, really run.
A lot of horsemen will look at a horse in 3 parts to determine whether the horse has balance and works as a whole. Here, Baffert shows us what that means.
And when I talk about balance, he has the balance from right here. You look at this part here, you look this part here, and here. It all falls in place. Cannon bones are not too long. The hocks are short. A lot of distance in here. I like a big hock.
In addition to the obvious components Baffert takes into account, he also considers such elements as the horse's tail.
I like a horse with a strong, when you lift up the tail, the root of the tail is strong. I think a lot of power comes from that. And that's why a lot of people ask me, why do you lift the tail up? To see what kind of, how much it gives, because a strong root means they have power back here. Then I look underneath here. They have their stomach muscles. I like to feel their stomach muscles. A lot of times I like to feel them too. Is some of these horses, when you go to touch these horses at the sales, the ones that are sort of mean or whatever, I sort of stay away from those kind of horses. But like this horse had a really good mind on him. But if you look back here, the engine is right here, the shoulder. If you come back to the end of the withers right here, and you draw an imaginary line, that's like almost, half his body. And that's where they get the power right here. And this horse is basically a distance horse. But when I bought him, he did not look like this. He was smaller, and we refer to him as a tropical fish, because from the side, if you look at tropical fish in the tank, he looked great. But then, when you got the front shot, we'll go around and get the front shot. He was very narrow, but he's filled out since then. I mean, he was like this. And, you'd like to see a horse with a little bit more, but a little bit wider in through here. But with him, he's a narrow horse. But as you can see, he wasn't the most correct horse either. But then again, that's where the 19,000 came in. As you can see, he turns out a little bit. He's not the correct. He's a little bit crooked, but it's one of those things you don't know until you break him. But the way he travels beautiful. He goes through it. He doesn't paddle. He doesn't do anything like that. But a light horse, a big light horse like that, it doesn't matter. But if he would have been real heavy and crooked, I would have stayed away from him, because it gets too hard, because when they grow bigger.
Baffert now shows us a horse he considers close to an ideal model. This is High Stakes Player, whom Baffert bought for $37,000 as a yearling and has won more than $400,000.
But here's a horse that I can buy these all day long. If you look at him, he just really comes into play. His legs, the balance, he's correct. They're sort of hard to buy now because the way the market is now. I mean, for 37, you can't buy a horse like that for 37,000. They're bringing 150, 200,000 now. But these are the kind of horses we call the old slam dunk kind of horses that the minute you look at him, I mean, he looked like this as a yearling. So this is where he starts right here. He's got the neck, the beautiful head, comes in here, this big forearm right in here. He just has a nice forearm. Through the knees here, he's perfect. Got the short little cannon bone. Another thing I don't like is I like a nice little short pastern. I don't like the long. I stay away from long pasterns. It's just, for some reason, you have a longer pastern means a slower horse. Some people like them, but I just stay away from long pasterns. I don't like a horse that has like a tiny little hoof. You want a good foot on your horse, and so I try to stay away from like a little tiny foot. Now, I've bought horses that have like a little clubby foot. That hasn't bothered me. I've had horses that have run well, like the right club foot. One of my best quarter horses had a right club foot, never bothered me at all. But basically, you want to stick with a horse that has a nice sized foot. For the body, you got a big, heavy body. You want a nice foot to hold him up. He has the body right in here, his shoulder. He's got everything here, up through the loin here. He's a lot of power in through here. He's got the beautiful hind end, the hind quarters. He just fills in. I mean, this is kind of horse that is just really, you don't see too many of them at the sales,
Almost from the day they are born, horses will give some indication of what they will look like later. However, young horses can change dramatically in their first year, with conformational problems either becoming more pronounced or in some cases diminishing.
It often amazes me how much yearlings change, and they may do it in October, they may do it in February, it might be right before the sales, but it really can happen so fast. We see major changes in knees and ankles in as little time as 2 weeks.
Reiley McDonald operates Eaton Sales in Lexington with his partner Tom VanMeter. MacDonald has been in the horse business for 20 years. He previously worked for the Fasig-Tipton Company, the country's oldest thoroughbred auction house. Eaton Sales sells approximately 500 horses a year at the major auctions. One of MacDonald's jobs is to assess each sale yearling to determine where it will fit in best, at the elite summer yearling sales at Keeneland and Saratoga, or the Keeneland September sale, which runs the price gamut. Pedigree will help make those determinations, but conformation plays a role too.
Conformation is a game of angle and lines. The straighter the angles and the straighter the lines, the less likely a horse is to have soundness problems. Of course, there are many good horses that do have soundness problems, that do have poor conformation. Nonetheless, this is a game of increasing your odds of having a sounder horse, so you want to see as good, straight conformation as possible.
Here, MacDonald shows us an example of when the angles and the lines work extremely well.
This is an example of the kind of horse that we feel could bring a lot of money at a yearling auction. He's about 2.5 months away from selling at the Keeneland July sales. He's a beautifully bred colt, but he's the kind of horse we like to see. He has a lot of the great parts that we like to see in a horse. He has muscle tone, he has a lovely neck, a very good shoulder, good length of back, a good strong hip, plenty of scope, and a very athletic, racy look to him. And when we go to look at a yearling when he comes out of a barn, I always try to start on the left side of a horse, and I try to look at every horse that I see, whether I'm looking at horses that are for sale or looking at horses that we're selling. I try to start from the left-hand side of the horse, and I stand back on the horse and get an overall general impression of really what the horse looks like. In general, you like to see a horse with good balance, a beautiful head, a beautiful eye like this horse has, good length of neck as compared to the length of his back. He has a lovely shoulder with great depth and about a 45-degree angle from the point of the top of his shoulder down to the point of his shoulder here. He has good length of back from here to here and a very long hip from the point here to the point of the buttocks. As you can see, he has a very strong gaskin, which is this area, the long muscle from here to here. His hind leg is set on fairly well, with a good plumb line down from the point of his buttocks right down to the bottom of his ankle. In front, from his forearm, he has good muscle definition in the forearm through here and here, and his knee is set on very well. He is neither back in the knee, nor is he forward or over in the knee. He has adequate bone. I wouldn't say that he has good, strong bone, but he has very average, adequate bone and perfectly suitable for his body type, which is not a big, heavy horse. He has a short cannon bone, and the angle of his pastern is about 45 degrees as well. Very good angle to his pastern, neither too straight or too much at an angle.
Now MacDonald shows us a yearling with rather severe conformational problems and what has been done to help her.
This is quite a well-bred filly in front of us, and she arrived in Kentucky 2 months ago with some problems. Her knees bowed out quite badly, which means they deviated out in this direction on both sides, away from the center. She also toed in, or is pigeon-toed quite badly. We've done a procedure on her knees to try to draw them in because they'd become so badly bowed out that we felt it would help her in the long run as far as her soundness goes to try and pull her knees in through a procedure that the veterinarians are now doing. As far as her being pigeon-toed, that's something that just can't be corrected. You can take them to the sales, you can do a certain amount of corrective work. We've started to feel that too much correction, or really any correction, is detrimental to the horse. We can lose the integrity of the horse's foot. As Meg walks her down and back, you can even see from this angle that she's quite pigeon-toed. You can also see that the right knee in particular is bowed out somewhat. She's also deviated in, or is pigeon-toed with the right front substantially, and that's a problem that basically she's going to have to live with for the rest of her life. The left knee is now in somewhat, so the procedure has been helpful to her, and she's actually quite a bit better through her knees than she was at one point just about a month and a half ago.
Tom VanMeter brings his unique perspective as a veterinarian to the business of selling young horses. He knows what a horse looks like on the inside as well as the outside.
It obviously gives me a an insight into the conformational flaws of a horse. Picking out horses or trading horses is just a matter of developing your eye for a horse. More than anything, it's just practice. It's to go out and see young horses and see what you like, believe in what you see, not listen to a lot of other people, but let the horse come out and fill your eye up, and that's the way I pick a horse.
The Kentucky native began buying and selling horses while practicing veterinary medicine, but now devotes his energies to Eaton Sales.
When a horse walks out, you want a horse that fills your eye up, that is athletic and balanced and racy, and that's what he is. This horse has a few little minor conformational problems that we feel will not hurt him as a racehorse, but could hurt him his marketability. We think the true horseman will look past these faults and still be interested in him when we go to the sale. Starting with his head, he's kind of a plain-headed horse. He has a nice enough eye. He's good and alert. See his ears forward there. He's a little bit thick in his neck. He's a little bit straight up in his shoulder. You want the shoulder angle to match the angle of the pastern. And I would say he's a hair straight up to pick on him a little bit. He's a hair straight up in his pasterns, and he's a hair straight up in his shoulder. As far as lines go on the horse, you like the line of his shoulder and the line of his hip to meet in an imaginary point right up here above in the middle of his back, which he does.
VanMeter knows that racing is full of examples of horses that overcame physical imperfections to perform successfully on the racetrack.
The big horse that comes to my mind is Sunday Silence. He was a horse that went through 2 sales. He was bid in by his owners twice. He had severely offset knees. He's severely sickle-hocked. And of course he went on to be champion 3-year-old. He won the Derby, he won the Preakness. That's the top horse. And also his great rival, Easy Goer, was a horse that was offset and towed out. Probably might not have been a very good sale horse, but obviously had the heart of a champion and went on to prove it.
VanMeter shows us a variety of problems ranging from minor to fairly severe that a buyer should take into account when considering a horse. Here is a yearling with a fairly common fault in his hind legs.
As you can see, as this horse walks away, his hocks are very close together. That is a conformational flaw known as being cow-hocked. If you look at a horse from the side and the hocks curb up underneath of him, that's a conformational flaw called sickle-hocked. Both flaws commonly go together. They are flaws which may not stop a horse from running but can lead to some infirmities. As you can see as he walks toward you, his knees are offset. He is a bench-kneed horse, slightly. Bench knee is where the knees are closer in together than his chest is.
This is a yearling with a fault known as towing out.
As you can see, this is a good example of a horse that tows out. Towing out is a fault that a lot of horsemen can live with. Towing out is a fault that causes stresses on the inside part of the leg, on the inside splint bones, causing splints, causing fractures on the medial or the inside part of the knees or the inside part of the ankles. The reason that towing out is not as bad of a fault as towing in is that the inside part of the leg, the cannon bone, the knee bones, the ankle bones, are actually stronger than the outside portions. And a horse that tows in creates stresses on the outside portion of his legs.
Lastly, VanMeter shows us a horse with a conformational fault that involves his back.
This is an example of a horse that is sway-backed. As you can see, he has a dip in his back from his point of his shoulder to the point of his hip. He doesn't have what's called a good top line. a top line with a lot of quality. Actually, some of these horses can go on to run, even though it is a fairly unsightly conformational flaw. And the problem is caused by a curvature of his spine.
Just as yearlings can change dramatically, so can two-year-olds. Once they start their early training, conformation faults can manifest themselves in various physical problems, so buyers should use an equally critical eye when they are looking at two-year-old racing prospects. Becky Thomas is considered a leader in the two-year-old market. A lifelong horse person, she got her start buying and selling quarter horses, then moved into thoroughbreds. Her niche is as a pinhooker, someone who buys yearlings then resells them, hopefully at a profit, as two-year-olds. Thomas and her Florida-based sequel Bloodstock have an impressive track record at this venture. She has resold two-year-olds for as much as 10 times the amount she paid for them as yearlings. Thomas has earned a reputation for picking athletes that can be trained for speed at an early age. These individuals are often described as a typical Becky Thomas type horse. They are usually compact, well-balanced, and have powerful hindquarters.
The first thing I want to see when you lead a horse out, I want to see a whole picture. I want to see balance. I want to see how the horse fits together. I want to see how the hip corresponds to the shoulder. I mean, if you've got a horse with a large hip and you're unable to make that shoulder match, then it doesn't really matter how correct they are if they don't have this one total picture where all the puzzle pieces fit.
What Thomas seeks in a horse is athletic potential.
I have to go back to the word balance. You know, I buy horses that sometimes are quite large. I buy horses that are sometimes on the smaller side, but balance and scope. Scope being, I want a horse to have some leg, even if they're a smaller horse. I want them to have enough leg to be able to reach out there. I want them to have the flexibility from the shoulder that when they walk, they've got some extension. I want there to be a look when you look at them to where they're snappy or perky when they walk at you instead of having the handler having to drag the horse along. I think there's just kind of an eye appeal.
When Thomas doesn't find those qualities in a young horse, she usually won't give it another look.
If I look at a horse the first time and there isn't instantly, you know, a like for this horse, then I won't come back, and it could be a conformational fault that I think is too much. He's too offset, or his hocks are too far behind him, or basically he's what a friend of mine terms a horse by committee. All the parts are there, and all the parts by themselves are not offensive, but put together they don't make a total package.
Let's follow Becky as she critiques a two-year-old entered in the Keeneland sale.
When I first look at a horse, I look, as I stated before, overall, I look at the total picture of the horse. When you look at this filly, I look first of all at what kind of balance that we have before I get into differentiating between the parts. This filly has a real good head and neck set. She's got a good eye. Her head is not particularly offensive or attractive. It's just kind of a plain head. She has nice length to her body. She's got a decent hip. She would be a filly that I would definitely take another look at if I was looking at her. When you're looking at her from a lateral view, her pastern slope is slightly exaggerated. I would like to see her with a slope from her pastern that would be a little more on the upright rather than standing like this. She has a pastern that is a little on the slopey side. I'd like for her to be somewhat in between there. That's called slacky pasterns, or slope in the pastern. I move up from there and go to the knee. She has nice flat knees. Her knees are not behind her as you would term a back at the knee horse, or a horse that is too upright. Those horses tend to have knees that are what you call banana knees. They tend to people view them as having been able to put a banana there, and that is a horse that is what you call flat-kneed or back at the knee. She has a nice line to her tendon. You don't see any abnormalities from her knee down to her pastern. She's got a good shape to her foot. I'd go back and again look at the hind leg on the same critique. She's got nice stifle and gaskin muscles through here. If you look at this filly, one of the primary faults that she has is that she has what's called curvy hocks. She does have hocks that are set out behind her. I'm going to touch her and hopefully she doesn't kick here. This angle right here, this is called a curb. That is due to stress on the hocks that causes the bone to become enlarged at that angle. It is a fault. A lot of people looking at this filly would say, well, gosh, I don't like her hocks. If you look at how she's made, she is made to have curves because her hocks are set out behind her.
Like all experienced horse people, Thomas always watches a horse walk. The walk gives an indication of how a horse will use himself and whether conformational problems will pose a serious worry.
When I watch a horse walk away from me, I am looking primarily at the hind end. I am looking for the hock set. I am looking for where they place their hind feet. A horse that tends to be uncomfortable behind sometimes will take whether it's the right hind or the left hind, they will take the side that is unaffected and bring it towards the midline to bear the most weight. When you have a horse that comes back towards you, you again are looking at how they bring their legs forward, what kind of angle is coming at you, where they bring your knees.
Becky points out some other conformation flaws in several different horses. Here, Thomas shows us a horse who is over at the knee.
If you were looking for a 100% wonderful, you would want this angle to be a little bit straighter right through here because she does have a tendency to be over at her knee. As you can see, it's easy to move her out of position.
This horse has the opposite fault, being back at the knee.
We're going to look at another filly now, and a conformation fault that's very common in foals and of course in 2-year-olds, but this is a filly that is slightly back at her knee. Again, think of the banana, think of a dish in the knee, whereas the other filly that we demonstrated had a knee that had a tendency to fold over. As you can see, this filly does not have, she thinks I want her to pick up her leg. She does not have that tendency to buckle. I am pressing on this filly's knee and she's not buckling as the other filly was. She does have the opposite conformational fault, which is called back at her knee.
Here is a horse who is upright or too straight in his pasterns.
This colt has a conformational fault that also is on the front end. This horse is upright, whereas opposed to the first filly that we looked at, that filly had pasterns that were too slopey. This colt's angles are too sharp, thereby putting too much pressure on his ankles. His ankles do not have any filling at them at this time, but lots of times when these horses start training, they are unable to take the concussion because it's direct bone on bone here, so thereby causing more than usual concussion on their ankles and causing what we call sesamoiditis or sesamoids. Again, this horse, see, as this horse is demonstrating now, he almost has a tendency to fold over at his ankle. I mean, this is a perfect example of that. Again, the angle of the pastern bone, as you can see, when he is not bearing full direct weight on it, it almost tends to fold over, as you're demonstrating right here, this angle right here.
Now Thomas shows us a horse who has the desirable pastern angle.
This colt has, as I've showed you, a horse that had upright pasterns and also a horse that I showed you that had a little bit too much length to his pasterns. This horse has a good angle to his pastern. He's got enough slope so that there is not direct concussion when he breaks over. He does not have an ounce of filling whatsoever in his ankles, which shows that he's not showing any wear and tear. Basically got a very good angle, very clean angle to his foot.
Here is a horse who has a cosmetic fault, which many people won't accept.
This colt does have a conformation defect that does not compromise his racing ability at all, but it is cosmetic and a lot of trainers are offended by it. This horse has what's called a parrot mouth. When you look at this horse, he has an overbite. Does not compromise his ability to eat. He certainly gets every mouthful of grain that he puts in there, but as you notice, the top jaw does rest a good 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch over his bottom jaw.
We've now seen a variety of horses, some close to ideal and others with a range of conformational problems. Hall of Fame trainer Mack Miller summarizes the keys to assessing conformation. The Kentucky native trained 4 champions over the years and also won the 1993 Kentucky Derby for his longtime patron Paul Mellon.
Well, I think the first thing we look at is just a composite. Bring the horse out, get a profile of him. The most important thing, you start with the head and see what his outlook on life is, what his expression is, how much width he has between his eyes. A good, smart head. I think that's the first thing. And then we go back to the, I've always thought that the shoulder was terribly important in a racehorse, be at the proper angle, which is theoretically about 45 degrees. The way the front legs are attached and they're absolutely straight to the ground. And I happen to like a short coupled horse, a short back. I don't like long backed horses. To go on to the hindquarters, I think he has to have a good leg that sits on the hind leg that's reasonably straight. Then if you look from the rear to the front, you want the hind legs to be fairly well apart. You don't like them cowhocked, so to speak. I think it's important to walk them and see them come to you and go away from you and see them turn. You have to be a little forgiving. I'd rather them be perfect in front. But towing in and towing out, if I had my druthers, if I had to make a choice, I'd take one that towed in a little bit rather than towing out. I think they stay sounder longer.
Miller considers multiple graded stakes winner Java Gold as close to an ideal horse as any he trained.
Java Gold probably was as good horse as I ever trained. And he was a very good-looking horse.
Java Gold gains the lead.
Miller now shows us a young horse who has a few conformational faults.
This filly is, the first thing you notice, she's back on her knees and she's offsetting her knees a bit. She's got a good hindquarter. She has a very good walk, a very pleasant expression. Got enough neck. She's not as good in the shoulder right now. She's going to come to that later, I think. She's got a short coupled. She's going to change a lot as she matures. Hindquarters are good. Her hind leg is okay. I think she's very nice. The offset knees are a thing that really concern me, and back on the knees a bit. That's a concern. But she's smart, got a nice disposition.
But even the best eye cannot guarantee that the horse will be a winner on the racetrack.
It's the same old story that's been in existence for all of our lives. Some can run and some can't, regardless of what they look like.
In summary, trying to pick a winner from the conformation standpoint can be as challenging and exciting as trying to pick one on the track. It is a challenge that requires skill and practice.
It's a fun game, and I love the chance aspect of it. Pay your money and take your chance, and I love that.